All right. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight on a Creative Boost webinar called Dailies Done on Scratch. One thing up front, this webinar will be recorded, obviously, but since I am quite alone showing you Scratch and how to do dailies, please keep your questions for the Q&A afterwards. And as to who I am Mazze. I work for Assimilate. I mainly work in technical support and also in product design. So if you're sending an email to support or you are active in color grading user groups, forums, etc., you will likely see, and you have a question or anything, you'll likely see a reply from me. And with me tonight here is Ansgar from the COPRA team. Please, Ansgar.
Hi guys, yeah, thanks Mazze for the introduction. And I'm Ansgar, the product manager for COPRA, the Dailies platform. And for those of you who don't know this platform, you can upload your transcoded clips to that platform. And from there on, you can share them with your creators. And later on, after Mazze has shown us the Scratch side, I will show you what you can do with the clips and with the metadata, how to import them to COPRA, and from there share them. So looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ansgar. Yeah, for the Scratch side, maybe let me start with the why you should use Scratch. And there's three very basic reasons for that. Flexibility, metadata, and operating speed. What that is in particular, I'll show you in just a second. And with that, I will first go the long way with you and show you all the corners of the software, because it will give you not only a much better understanding of the software, but you will also be able to better troubleshoot in case something goes wrong. And after we've gone the long way, I'll definitely show you the shortcut as well on how to expedite a whole bunch of tasks. And during all that, we will take some detours, mainly when it comes to look matching, so LUT and CDL matching, as well as audio syncing, because there's a number of ways to do both of these tasks, and it's worth exploring more than just one way. Yes, so make sure you have food, make sure you have a beer next to you. This will take a while because we're covering everything from import to export with metadata, with color management, with offloading. I'll show you the media browser tool, which is an incredibly powerful tool inside Scratch to deal with metadata and a whole heap of other tasks. So yeah, tonight is going to be hard work for every one of us. All right, so let me exit out of this project and let's start with Scratch and the settings you should take care of before starting a project. All right, so there's three kinds of settings in Scratch: project settings, user settings, and system settings. In the system settings, what you do here is set up your system the way you need it to be. So in the General tab, this begins with the SDI settings, which you can configure in this dialog. You can, if you have multiple output cards or output devices installed, right now I only have ScopeLink, which is a virtual output device, but you can have multiple output cards installed. So 2 DeckLink cards or 2 AJA cards or even 3 AJA cards and 5 DeckLink cards and Bluefish cards as well. And you enable the device up here, you set up the format and everything down here, and at the very bottom you configure your input and output channels for the video I/O. So this is not just audio, this is also video. Alright, then obviously you can select your panel of choice. Scratch supports everything from Tangent, including the CP200 panels and the Avid Artist Color. These two drop-downs I'll skip, and in the Metadata tab you can set up default project metadata. What that is, we'll get to that in just a bit. The Notes tab is very important for the DIT because it allows you to pre-configure up to 8 color nodes which work similar to locators in Avid. And you can specify the color for any given node and the text that node should have. And during your metadata QC, you can hit Shift and F1 through F8 to apply any of these 8 nodes at the current timecode. Custom commands is something that we will touch at the very end, real quick. But basically, you can place buttons with certain functions throughout the UI in Scratch. And one of these buttons is this one, the COPRA post-render app. So it's an app that, well, a script actually, that's being started after a given render has finished. And how that works, I'll show you at the very end of this session. Lastly, here's the Advanced tab, and it has a whole bunch of settings in here. And you actually rarely have to touch any of these settings. You can, you're free to, but usually you only have to if something doesn't work as expected. Okay, user settings. In the user settings, you mainly control the look and feel of Scratch, and mainly the main settings in here are down here, the snapshot settings, which format and where it's being saved, and whether all the snapshots are being loaded back into the tray. Tray is kind of the equivalent to Resolve's gallery. The other important setting is the control gearing. What is control gearing? Well, in Scratch, when you have these numeric parameters, you click inside and then you circle around the parameter, just like you would do with an encoder, right? And the speed in which this goes is determined by this number here, 75% speed. And if you hold down Shift while turning the virtual encoder, as you can see now, it goes much slower. And the speed in which it goes when you hold down Shift, that's determined here. So it doesn't necessarily have to be slower, like 25%, which is the default. It can even be 100% and go faster than the normal gearing. Up to you. Okay. Now let's create a new project, and with that go over the project settings. Let's call this project Dailies in Scratch and hit create. Now, the important thing here is the project paths. So there's a media render and cache directory. The media directory I will set to my external drive and into the folder Dailies Uber demo. And as you can see, the render and cache drive are automatically created as subfolders in there. Now, it's best practice to import your media from within the media directory. So if you use a third-party app to download footage from the cards, this might be your Scratch drive where you download all the footage to. You can obviously import footage from any other location, but in case you have to move the project, basically on the new machine, the absolute path to the footage could change, like if you move it from OS X to Windows, where you have drive ladders and such. In this case, all you have to do is tell Scratch, hey, now your media directory isn't here under /volumes, m2 data, now your media directory is under, I don't know, m /, and so on. And with that, Scratch can relink all the footage inside the media directory automatically. So you don't have to relink everything manually. Next, here you have the default image format settings. What do these do? Basically, the resolution, aspect, and frame rate that you dial in here are just defaults for new created timelines. So every time you create a new timeline in your project, that timeline will have these settings. However, you can change the settings of any existing timeline at any point, and you can also change the default at any point here in the project settings. That's one of the really great things about Scratch. You are never locked down into any setting. You can literally change any setting at any time, and most of them even while the clip is playing. So I'll leave this on 4K UHD for now. And down here you have the default output data format. I'll leave this to 16-bit float, OpenEXR. and I'll set the color space to Rec 709 because that's very likely what we will be rendering out. But again, you can, even though the default output format here is set to Rec 709, you can always change that, and you can obviously render to multiple different color spaces from a single timeline. Okay, let's hit OK and enter our project. Now, as you can see, we have these tabs here at the bottom, and we will go through all those tabs one after another, starting with the Construct tab. The Construct tab is where you load footage, where you organize your assets, where you deal with metadata, where you do audio sync, lot matching, etc. All these basically non-creative tasks, if you want. So down here you have your menus to load a conform, an ALE file, for instance, or match looks from our live grading application live looks, sort your timeline, etc., etc. And up here you will organize your footage. As you can see on the left here, we have the so-called project tree. If you run with the cursor against the edge of the screen, you can swipe it away or bring it back in. And as a DIT, you usually work like this. Hit the edit button down here and relabel the group to day 1. And your timeline, it depends a little bit on the way you're working. So your timeline could be a 001, which is the first card ever on day 1, if you want. And the next timeline would be a 002, and so on. However, some people like to work differently, so they don't work in reels. They basically offload the footage over the day, and at the end of the day, they start the transcode to FDNX or whatsoever. So they rather create one timeline that's called ACAM, and they load in all the footage, all the reels from the ACAM, and transcode that overnight. That's also a way to work. So let me delete this again, like such. Now, let's import some footage. Hit the Import Clips button here, and that brings you to the Import Clips dialog. And let me select the video folder here that has a whole bunch of QuickTime files in here. Previously, I talked about the shortcut that exists, and the shortcut basically is this button, which I will leave disabled for now. If you disable the select folder button, you can select single clips here, or even shift select or control select. I'll leave this enabled. And if you want to limit your import to a certain file type, you can switch from all formats to the specific format that you want. Okay, so now I'll hit open. Scratch is asking me whether I want to change my default timeline resolution, etc. No, I do not. Okay, this is basically the import of clips. Now we have everything in here, as you can see, in a storyboard view. And what we can now take a look at real quick is offloading. Now most of you will probably use a separate tool for offloading than you're using for Dailies transcoding. However, you can use Scratch for offloading as well. However, it's a very simple function. It doesn't come with all the bells and whistles that, for instance, Pomfret Silver Stack comes with. The function is hidden in the Tools menu down here, and it's called Consolidate Timeline. So the workflow is this. Basically, you did not import the footage from your media directory, because that would indicate that you already copied it. You're basically imported straight from the camera card. And the first thing that you'll do is go here, open the Consolidate Timeline dialog, and now set up to 3 paths to back up the footage to. So let me set this just to the very same folder, Dailies Uber demo, and in here. And now I can choose to copy it including all external media, which basically means XMLs, ALEs, etc. Any file that ships with the actual media on the card. Usually you want that. Whether to create MD5 checksums and relink media. Relink media means that once the footage is copied to the first location, Scratch will relink all the clips that are already inside the project to that location, so you can safely remove the camera card after the backup is done. Okay, that is basically it. I won't do that now because it will take a while to copy all the footage. But this is basically the offloading function that you can use. Okay, and with all the clips being backupped, offloaded, and imported, let's take a quick look at conform. So, for some of you, it's very important to be able to import, for instance, an ALE in order to import certain metadata for the clips. You would do that here, hitting the import button, and let me quickly select an ALE file that looks like this with all the metadata inside, and you would conform that and apply it to the clips. Now I'm not going to do that right away because we'll get to it one way or the other. However, just to import clip metadata, you don't necessarily need to import an ALE in the first place, because if you, let me select just one clip and swipe to the right to bring up the metadata stack here, as you can see, Scratch reads pretty much all of the metadata from the source file already. So we have the name, the real ID, the time code. This is all generic metadata. However, if you scroll down a little, you will see all the camera or clip specific metadata, like the camera ID, the camera index, the camera model, serial number, etc. And also the exposure index, ASA, the eye index, the lens type, etc., etc., etc. So you get all that with the actual source clips already, and hence you do not necessarily need to import and conform an ALE file. Now, since we're talking about metadata, for Array Raw and Array ProRes MXF, Scratch also supports frame-based metadata. First of all, what does that mean? Let me quickly create another timeline, go to import clips, and import this Array Raw clip. If I just double click it, I'm in the player, and let's bring up the metadata stack over here and look, for instance, at the lens focal distance. If I now scrub through the clip, here you can see the focus shifts from the flower in the background to the flower in the foreground. And as you can see, if you look here, the lens focus distance actually changes for each frame. As a side note, let me quickly close the project, go to System Settings, and in the Advanced tab here, search for frame, finding the read per frame metadata setting here. This has to be enabled, and you have to specifically enable it. It's disabled by default for the simple reason that not for all workflows this is mandatory, and it obviously takes a small but noticeable toll on performance. Because obviously there's a difference on whether you read the metadata off of every frame or just off of the first frame for the whole clip, right? So that's why it's disabled by default, and if you require per frame metadata, you have to enable it in here. Alright, now why is this important and really good to have? Well, especially in days where virtual production and VFX workflows are pretty much everywhere, you might have to render dailies for the VFX department. And these dailies you will likely render in the native resolution or maybe in UHD, whatever is requested. And for VFX, you will likely render the dailies as an OpenEXR sequence. Now, if you're rendering an image sequence, you can render out all this frame-based metadata into the EXR sequence. And the VFX compositor at the other end can use this per frame metadata to link to his virtual camera in his compositing software, be it Nuke, be it Flame, or After Effects, whatever you have. You can use the focal distance or also positional data like camera, tilt, pan, etc. In order to have your virtual camera inside the compositing software animated by those values. This is pretty cool, and it is certainly a plus if you can offer this functionality as part of your daily service. Okay, now back to our original timeline here. And now we're going to take a look at the media browser, which is behind this shy button all the way over to the right. The media browser is the most versatile and most powerful tool in Scratch when it comes to asset management, organizing, dealing with metadata, etc., etc. You'll see in a second why. Now first I hit Command A to select all my clips here and open the media browser. The selection I make here in my timeline is being taken over into the media browser. And as you can see up here, I have these tabs, and we'll start with the base tab. And the base tab now lets you basically select a column here. Let me, for starters, choose the real ID column. Because what we have to do for Avid Dailies, for instance, is to copy the source name of all the clips into the real ID column. So they are being carried as the tape name inside Avid. Now we can do that by, like I said, select the real ID column, and it shows up down here, and choose any of these metadata tokens, like for instance the source name, which is hashtag #asName. Fill that in here, hit Z, and as you can see, now the real ID for all our clips reflects the source clip name. And we can then again select the name column and do anything else we like with it. For instance, fill in hashtag scene underscore hashtag take, which doesn't work right now because you can see scene and take columns are empty. That information was not stored in the source clip, so we don't have it, but we will very soon. However, all this obviously depends on how the assistant editor requests you to deliver your dailies, but you could do that because some of them like to have their master clip names in Avid reflect the scene and take information. Next is the Grade tab, and we'll look at that in a bit. Mainly what you do here is setting up color spaces, loading lookup tables or CDLs. In the File tabs, you can mainly do relinking or calculating checksums or file sizes if you need to. In the Audio tab, which is what we're going to look at next, is, well, loading and syncing audio. And the Note tab holds the decoding settings for any of the selected clips. Right now we have only ProRes files selected, so we can only tell Scratch, hey, interpret these clips as video or full range. However, if we, for instance, go to our Array Raw shot, open the media browser, and in the Note tab, we now have ISO, Kelvin tint, RGB gains, the debayer mode, and also the color space that we want to debayer to. Speaking of debayer modes for Array Raw, you can choose the official Array debayers that are being shipped with their SDK, or Scratch's own fast debayer, which is insanely fast, but quality-wise not as good as these two. However, I would say very, very much sufficient for dailies. If you're rendering to DNX HD36 anyways, you probably won't see a difference between any of these in the resulting dailies. Alright, and lastly we have the Metadata tab. Now if I select all of my clips in the first timeline again, here you can just display columns that are shipping with the clips. Basically, this representation is in no way different from this representation here. Just that over here, you can see it for multiple clips. However, you can also create your own column. My column, just like that. And you can obviously also fill it with metadata again, and create your own custom column with combined metadata and so on. So in a nutshell, whenever you want to do batch operations, whenever you want to do something to multiple clips at once, you would do that here in the media browser. Because all of these settings here basically also can be done on a clip-by-clip basis in either the Edit tab or the Color Fix tab. However, usually these tasks are batch operations, so you would do them in the media browser, and this is what makes this tool so powerful. Okay, now let's look at audio sync. There's a number of ways to sync audio in Scratch, and this will be one of the detours that we will be taking, because I could show you how to do timecode based audio sync and just be done with it. However, as we all know, the reality on set is that sometimes the timecode wasn't synced, or that the timecode is offset, or it drifts, etc. So usually you have to do some manual audio syncing, or you have a DSLR there that does not record timecode, and so on. So there's a whole bunch of scenarios that I want to try to cover here, because I do believe it's important to cover these and not only show you just one very optimized way to do it. Alright, so again, let's Control A or Command A, select all clips, go to Media Browser, and to the Audio tab. And as you can see, like we noticed before, the scene and take columns are empty. Now, scene and take information is something that the sound engineer on set, in most cases, does record with his audio files. So if we make sure that import scene take here is enabled, and we then go to Find Audio, select the folder with all the audio files in it, select, and as you can see, now all the audio files are loaded onto the corresponding clips. They are also slipped accordingly, and scene and take information is also populated to each clip from the WAV files. And as you can see even further, there's also little notes for each clip that have been imported with the audio files. What we also import here with this button is not only comments that the sound engineer might have entered, but also circle take metadata. As you can see, we have this column here, circled. Well, apparently this hasn't been used with this footage, but if that information is in the audio files, it will be attached to the clips and can, from this point onwards, be used to rename the clips or to be used inside a burn-in or even for output file naming. We'll get to that in just a bit. Now, timecode based audio sync can be like what I just showed you. However, there's also a good chance that there is no timecode sync between the sound recorder and the camera. So let's take a quick look at importing audio and syncing it manually. Now this is what you would usually do in the Edit tab. So let's go to Edit, and here we have our timeline. As you can see, this is super tiny footage. Doesn't matter for the time being, I'll just leave it as is. And when you do manual audio syncing, or also QC for audio, you would go to the audio menu here. As you can see, all these clips already ship with embedded audio, and this is why you can see this little speaker icon here. I'm not sure if you can really see that, but there's a little white speaker icon here which basically tells you these clips have embedded audio. If I go to our other timeline here, you can see the speaker icon is yellow, which means that the audio is externally synced. Alright, back to our clip here. The other thing that you want to do is display the audio panel here. Now in the audio panel, you can first of all choose your output device. You can also choose whether you want to display the slip for the audio in frames or in milliseconds. And even more so, you have the waveform display here. So let's get rid of the metadata stack, put the image over here. The two most important shortcuts here is Alt and drag up down to scale, and space and drag to pan the image around. And now you have two ways to load audio here in the audio menu. Over here on the right, you can load audio per timeline, which is more of a finishing feature actually. If you get the complete mix from the sound studio and you just want to load that onto your timeline, you would do that here. However, in Dailies, we want to load audio per clip. So let me go in here, hit add, and load the first audio file. Right, so we now have that. And we would just find the clap, because there's two ways of syncing audio. First, we basically find the frame where the clap closes here. And if I make this a little bit bigger, and I'll show this a little bit better. As you can see, the spike of the clap is probably here, right? I'm pretty sure it is, because for these spikes, there's not much else going on in front of the spike. And usually, as we know, the scene and take is being spoken out by the clapper, and that's probably what these waveforms are about. Anyways, we are parked on the frame where the clap falls, and now all we have to do is tell Scratch, hey, look to the left or to the right for the spike of the clap. So let's do that. Here we go. Now let's play backward and forward. Spot on. Hit Control right arrow for the next clip, load the next audio file, and again, quickly look for the clap. There we go. There we are. And again, let's quickly have a look. So here the spike is probably to the left. Play backwards and forward. And spot on. All right, and this being said, there's also a different way of loading and manually syncing audio. Let's jump over to the next clip. Again, hit add, select the audio wave file. And what we can now do is basically just listen to the clip. Let me jump forward a little bit. Okay, here is where the clap is, obviously. So what we can do is set a marker and now look for the frame where the clap falls. Here we are. And what we now do is hit sync. And Scratch will pull the waveform over. As you can see, we're still like more than half a frame off. What you can do to refine it is just grab and drag the waveform over. It's recommended that the spike of the clap is within the first quarter of the current frame. So right about there. And this works best especially for Avid dailies. Okay, now let's just finish off the last one. Hit add, load audio, and again, there was the clap. Go back, set marker, and there actually falls the clap. Here we are, hit sync, adjust slightly, and there we go. Now, you might even need to do this little adjusting here if you have done a timecode based audio sync, because, well, most of the time the audio drifts slightly or is for whatever reason slightly off. So you want to refine the sync, and the audio panel with the waveform tab lets you do that very, very quickly and very accurately. Now the other thing that you might want to do during audio sync is display the scene take panel. So in case you have scene and take information already delivered with the audio files, you could just cross-check whether the scene and take information here digitally corresponds to what's written on the clap. If that's not the case, what you can do obviously is just go here. Where are we? So this is scene 4/5 take 7, and you would do that 4/5 take 07. And what you can do now, since we know that none of these clips actually have scene and take information, is enable auto mode. And then I can hit Control right arrow, jump to the next clip, and as you can see, the take number automatically increases. Here we have take 9, and here we have take 4, 5, scene 4, 5A, take 2. So if I now change the scene and add the A in, the take number automatically jumps to 1. In this case, well, it's not correct, so let's make it take 2. The C over here lets you tag a shot as a circle take, and the button here lets you just increase the scene value. Okay, so this is manual audio sync and also cross-checking scene and take metadata, digital versus what's written on the clap. However, that's not the end of it. Some of you will have to deal with LTC. Now, what's LTC? LTC is longitudinal timecode, basically timecode in the form of an audio signal. I have prepared a very little slide, so let's import that and take a quick look. LTC, linear or longitudinal timecode. Timecode stored in the form of an audio signal. What it sounds like, I'll show you in a bit. It sounds horrible, but nobody ever said the sound of timecode is beautiful either. So why would you want to use LTC? Well, some cameras, like DSLRs, do not record proper timecode in their files. And that makes us sad. However, you can use a little device from a company called Tentacle Sync, which creates timecode in the form that we know, but also in the form of that audio signal, which you can pipe into the microphone input of the DSLR. And this way you will have a very fancy audio track on that video clip, but that audio track basically is your timecode track. And that makes us very happy. Now there's a number of scenarios. First of all, the sound recorder actually records proper timecode into its WAV files, and the DSLR camera records the LTC instead. This is probably the most common, most valid scenario that you might run into. However, it also exists the other way around, for sure, or even that none of the used devices for audio and video recording support proper timecode. So for these scenarios, Scratch has a very handy function. So let me first import video. So this is video that does not have a proper timecode track. It's these 3 clips, and if we look here at the metadata stack, timecode says 0, 0, 0. However, our audio files, they do have proper timecode, so how do we sync them? Well, I'll just select those 3 clips here, go to Media Browser, to the Base tab, and here we have these little shy button called Read LTC. And once I hit it, watch the timecode column here update. And 3, 2, 1, here we go. So now the clips have proper timecode all of a sudden. And just so you know what it sounds like, it looks like this. And now I have no clue how loud this will be. You might want to cover your ears. That's what LTC sounds like. However, we are going to replace this ugly sound with the sound files that we have. Hit Find Audio, LTC, Audio, Source Audio, and here we are. And as you can see, even scene and take information came through from these audio files. So now that we have that, all we have to do is go to Edit and make sure that our clap is synced up. And that's even easier if we display it in the audio menu. And as you can see, this right away is one of these cases where, okay, well, the spike is somewhere in between this frame and this frame, so maybe indeed the clap was closed between 2 recorded frames. However, most assistant editors require you to shift that over onto the current frame. So this is what you can do here. The other scenario obviously is that your footage already has timecode. Let's import that. And as you can see, we have proper timecode here for the first, second, and third clip. However, your audio does not have proper timecode because it was recorded with an iPhone or whatever. Then you can go to Media Browser, Audio tab, and enable this option, Check LTC. And if we now hit Find Audio, go here, LTC, then it will already be synced up very nicely. If we go to Edit, you can see that the LTC is on the first audio track here, and then follow 4 individual channels. And again, we can do our usual thing with checking where the spike of the clap is. Okay, this was one bigger detour in terms of audio sync and how to do it in Scratch. Oh, actually, as a matter of fact, I forgot one more thing. If you have a global delay on your audio, you can just dial that in here in either frames or milliseconds, which is very, very cool. If for whatever reason there was a delay in the timecode or whatsoever, and you have all clips with a 2 frame delay, you can just dial that in here and do it like this. And now everything is slipped by 2 frames, or if you want, -2 frames, like such. Okay, and this takes us to look matching and batch LUT loading and all these kinds of things, which will be our second bigger detour, because again, there's a whole heap of ways that you can go, because there's also a whole heap of ways where things can go wrong on set during production, which you as the DIT most likely have to compensate for one or the other way, and we try to make that as easy as possible. So let's add another timeline. Go to Import Clips, now choose our footage here. And as you can see, this again is QuickTime footage from the Arri Alexa, and it looks very loggish, very flat and desaturated. So it most likely needs a lookup table. Now, usually what you might have is just a standard lookup table to go from Arri White Gamut log.c to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Now you can do that by just selecting all the clips in your timeline, go to Media Browser, and go to the Grade tab. Now here you have these 2 columns, Source LUT and Grading LUT. Basically, a Source LUT is an input LUT, just as such. So it will be applied before any grade. However, in most cases, you will likely have some sort of grade. Either you want to grade your dailies, or you have a CDL from live grading, etc., which would need to be applied before the log to lin LUT. So in this case, you would want to load it as a grading LUT. Now down here, what you do is, first of all, decide whether you want to load and apply a single LUT or grade, which basically means there's just one LUT and it should go onto all the clips, or whether you want to match on shot name or search mask, which means I have a number of LUTs or CDLs and they need to be matched onto the corresponding clips, which I'll be covering in just a minute. And next, you would tell whether you want to load that lookup table as a source or input LUT or as a grade LUT. So let's switch this to grade, hit load, and I'll go to our LUTs folder, and here we have the Alexa log.c to Rec 709 LUT. Hit open, and as you can see, it got loaded here into this column for all of our 4 selected clips. Now if I hit OK, I go to color fix, as we can see, this is all nice, contrasty, saturated, and whatnot. Perfect. Now let's look at a slightly more challenging workflow. Again, select all these. And now let's assume we have a lookup table for each and every shot, because live grading has saved one lookup table for each and every shot. So I'll reset the grading LUT, and instead set this to match on shot name or search mask. Now if I alt tab into my Finder, go to my LUT folder, here I have a folder called 3DL name. So here are 3D lookup tables in there, and they have the exact same name as the corresponding video clips they are supposed to be loaded onto. So what I'll tell Scratch is just hashtag as name, source name, which basically tells Scratch, hey, you know what? Look for, check the file name of each lookup table and compare it to the source name of each and every clip. Now, if I hit load and point Scratch to the folder containing those lookup tables, hit select, now everything is loaded. As you can see, here's the A025 clip 1, and that goes to the corresponding clip, A025 clip 1, and so on. So if we now hit OK, as you can see, I made very distinctive looks, red, blue, green, and desaturated. And if we go through, this all matches. Now, since we're done with audio syncing, let's rather look at the Color FX tab. And for that, I'll switch to the Dailies toolset real quick. And down here in the LUT menu, we have these lookup tables loaded. And this is also a way that allows you to cross-check whether the correct LUT, B24, C20, is loaded onto the correct clip. If we had loaded it as an input LUT, it would be here in the media menu in the source remap. Okay, but there's more. Not every time you have the pleasure to be working with lookup tables that are labeled just like your clips are. So let's reset that. In another scenario, I have a 3DL per scene. So we have 3 looks, one for scene 160, one for 209, and one for 210. So this is 3 lookup tables. However, we have 4 clips, as you know. Now, let's first go ahead and load the audio files, because as you can see, we don't have the scene information in Scratch, which we need to match the looks. So, find audio, and go here, and everything is synced. And as you can see, we also have 2 circle clips in here. And now we have the scene column filled. And as you can see, we have scene 160 take 1 and scene 160 take 2. So we have 2 clips for scene 160, which should both receive the corresponding look. Now back to the grade tab, and instead of looking for as name, we will be looking for hashtag scene. Hit load, go to LUTs, 3DL scene, select. And as you can see, the LUT, which is scene 160, got loaded onto both of these clips. So, taking a look, this is desaturated, scene 160. Here we go. Take 1, and at the very end we have take 2, which is the circle take, and it also received that very same lookup table, whereas the 2 in between have their corresponding blue and green lookup tables. Very nice. However, you could even have lookup tables for each scene and take. Yes, that exists. So, back in here, let's reset our grading LUT. And now, if we look at this, we have the scene number, an underscore, and then the take number for each 3DL. So let's reflect that here. Say scene underscore hashtag take. And again, hit load. Choose this. And again, everything's loaded, matched. And if we go through, we have red, blue, green, and desaturated. All good. Now, all these lookup tables are nice and fine. Oh, and actually with the audio, even these comments, Basecamp generator in the background, Mazze's comment, my comment, and generator in background traveled with the audio files and were loaded onto these clips. Let's reset our grading LUTs. Now, most of you will probably work with a combination out of CDL carrying the creative intent, and a technical LUT that goes from, let's say, log C to Rec 709 right after. So, what to do there? First of all, I obviously have that prepared here with a CDL for each and every clip. Here I just refrain from all the options that I prepared here with the 3DL. You obviously also have those for CDLs, and you would load a CDL the very same way. So here we have a CDL per clip with the same name, so let's change this to sname. What is important with CDLs, however, is that this dropdown is set to grade, because the CDL is not a lookup table, it is actually a grade, because it uses the parameters inside the grading application to dial in the grade. Basically, if we look in here, go to color, and quickly set this to CDL sliders. Here we have the 4 CDL parameters: offset, power, slope, and saturation. And as you can see, they are all at their default. Now, if I load these CDLs, load and match, let's CDL select. As you can see, nothing really happened. We don't see it in the source LUT nor in the grading LUT column. Why is this? Because obviously we could now go ahead and, as you can see, now all the sliders are different. We have the red look here, blue, green, and desaturated. We could now go ahead and modify this look using the sliders here. However, that would invalidate the CDL that we have loaded. And hence, these cannot show up here. However, what we did is, if you go to the metadata tab, and I'll disable all these, we have created a new column called CDL match. And in here, you can check against whether the correct CDL has been loaded onto the correct clip. Alright, now we have loaded all the CDLs onto our clip. Again, here we have red, blue, green, and desaturated. All that's left to do is basically load the log to lin LUT on all our clips. So, single LUT or grade, not as a source LUT, but as a grade LUT. Hit load, go to LUTs, select the LUT, and now we are all set. As you can see, the LUT menu down here is already applied after any primary grade that we have here. So also after the CDL grade. And just to confirm, here's red, here's a contrasty blue, contrasty green, and contrasty desaturated look. Okay. Now, there is a slightly different way to import CDL grades. So, let me create a new timeline, load our footage again, and let me switch back to the full tool set, hit import here, and what I can now do is load an ALE with the CDL info. So hit open, and this is the conform window. I have my 4 clips in here, and now I can use these drop downs here at the top of each column to tell Scratch whether I want to match on whatever's in that column or whether I want to import whatever's in that column. The default will probably work, so I'll leave the name, start, end, etc. all on match. So start matching. Ooh, match on real ID. No, exclude that. Clear, start, and there we go. So we have 1 match per clip. And if we now scrub over here, there is AAC SOP, slope, offset, power, and saturation. And these are already set to import as such. So the CDL grade will automatically be imported for each clip from this ALE file. Every other metadata item, like the camera ID or the camera index or the camera model, etc., we can just import that as generic metadata, which we already have, as you know, as part of the clip metadata, or we can exclude it. I'll just leave it as such. Now that we've done the matching here, I can just hit execute. And as you can see, again, we have our red, blue, green, and desaturated look. And all that's left to do, again, is to load the log-to-lin lookup table to make everything show up correctly. Okay. That being said, you can do the same with CDL and the lookup table. We can automate both of these tasks. So again, let's load our footage like such, and let's hit import and import our other ALE, which also references a lookup table. Hit open. Again, exclude the real ID for this example. Hit match. We have a match for each and every entry here in this ALE. Scrub over ASC, CDL grade for slope, offset, power, and saturation. Import as such. Great, awesome. And now we have this other column that says 3D LUT, and it reads the name of the 3D LUT to be loaded onto all these clips, which is again our log.c to Rec 709 lookup table. By default, this is set to import. However, we can just hit this drop down and say, well, import as grade LUT. Now, obviously, the lookup table is not included with the ALE file. It's just a reference. It says, well, this is the lookup table you have to use. Now, in order for this import as grade LUT to work, the lookup table that's referenced should be in the very same folder as the ALE. Here we go. If that is the case, and I now hit execute, I have it all here. I have my, well, let me switch back to the Dailies toolset. I have my CDL grade, red, green, blue, and desaturated, and also the lookup table loaded onto all these clips. Okay, coming to an end for the look or LUT or CDL matching workflows. This has been probably the biggest detour, but as you can see, there's just a multitude of ways that you can go to automatically match your looks, be it CDL or lookup tables, onto the clips inside Scratch. And no matter what went wrong on set, there's very likely a way that you can compensate for using Scratch on that. Okay, and now that we went over all this, it's probably time to show you the shortcut. Basically, when you go to import clips, and I select just this folder, and I hit create new timeline, and now hit open, I will get a follow-up dialog box. And this not only lets me create a new timeline, no, it does a lot more for us. First of all, for the group, do you want to create a new group plus next number, which would make this the group for day 2, since our current group is day 1? No, in this case, please stay with the current group. And the timeline name shall be created per folder name or per subfolder or so, or maybe just the current timeline. Next, I can apply framing. For instance, as you can see, these clips have a resolution of 2K. However, my timeline right now is 4K. Well, usually you do not blow up dailies. You do not scale them up from 2K to 4K. However, if I wanted to do so, I would go here into the framing menu, hit the all button first, and set them to fit width. And now they are all, oops, come on, scaled up to fit the width of the frame, just like that. However, going in here, new timeline, I can tell Scratch to do that automatically upon import, because maybe my timeline is HD, but I'm shooting 8K footage, who knows? So then I can tell Scratch, hey, as soon as you import those clips, please scale them down to fit width, just like that. I can tell Scratch to load and sync audio. So I'll just set the path here to audio, and there we go. I can tell it to update the clip real ID, which is what we did just before, where we selected our clips Well, let me go back to this timeline, select all our clips, and as you can see, the real ID is actually different from the actual clip name. So now I can select my real ID here, type in hashtag #name, and now copy the clip name over into the real ID column, which is a requirement for pretty much every Avid Dailies workflow. Again, I can spare myself from doing that by using the new timeline option and just enabling the update clip real ID option. I can also tell it to calculate the file sizes for each and every clip, because I will probably need that for my reports. I can also generate these file sizes from the media browser, as we have seen, or also from the reports dialog. That's not a problem, but I can take care of this right upon import. I can match looks from LiveLooks, our live grading application, and I can apply a source and or grading LUT right upon import. So this is a whole bunch of tasks that we just went over. It doesn't replace all the detours we took, for sure. Just stuff like LUT matching or ALE conform, or also audio sync based on timecode. These things you will still have to do in the media browser, but just so you know, there is a shortcut that takes care most of all these chores for you, and only if something goes wrong, you have to get into the weeds that we just came out a second ago. Okay, so this is the new timeline feature. Where are we? Okay, we also did metadata QC with scene and take checking. Next would be Dailies grading. Okay, I won't spend too much time on that, but however, as you know, the edit tab is first and foremost for audio syncing in conjunction with the audio panel up here, and the color effects tab is obviously for grading. Now, depending on what toolset you have selected here, you might get all the options in Scratch, including keys and masks and whatnot. I'll refrain myself from showing you all of these tools and just go to the Dailies toolset, and in here you have a very limited but probably sufficient toolset. And all in all, it's a cleaner interface and less things can get lost, and yeah, it should be faster to work with in a Dailies context. So you have the balance menu, which I'll skip for now because the offset and pregain sliders you have here in the color menu as well. Relabel to offset and slope. And in here, the cool thing about this menu is that you can choose your way to work. If you don't have a panel handy, you can just choose CDL sliders and adjust your grade using these sliders here on screen. You can also go to CDL wheels if you like color wheels better, and you can obviously also grade using your own grading panel. However, the best way to work is probably with the lift gamma gain wheels. Now, even though they are lift gamma gain, they will still produce genuine CDL values in the background. And, which is really nice, even if you don't have a panel attached, you can highlight these three trackballs by pressing J, K, and L. And if I now highlight gamma, for instance, and I use my mouse wheel just by hovering over the image and using my mouse wheel or two fingers on my trackpad, I can dial in the ring, and if I just click and drag, I can move the trackball, which is a really, really great way to work if you don't have a panel on set. Next, we have the numeric menu, which is basically just a numeric representation of what's inside the balance and color menus with a little plus. So for instance, in here, you have Kelvin, tint, defocus, clarity, but even more so, and I encourage you to use that, S-curve. S-curve is, well, like contrast, but without clipping. So if I for a second bypass the lookup table here and display our scopes with the button up here, scopes have also a histogram and also a vector scope and also curves that I can see here. Now let's for a second just take a look at waveforms and curves. Now if I dial in the contrast, as you can see, this will at some point clip the image. Right now it's, we're still, yeah, we're clipping in the shadows pretty quickly, as you can see by the waveform, right? What S-curve does instead, oops, let's reset that. What S-curve does is, well, it dials in an S-curve grade, and this prevents you from clipping any image content. Even though I might push it really hard here and it might look as if it clips, if you check the waveform, it does not clip. So this is a pretty cool way to dial in contrast without letting the image clip. And then you can compensate a little by pushing up the gamma, like that. But this is really very easy. You can map it to an encoder on your panel if you like and use it from there. However, we obviously also have curves, which you can use to dial in, well, an S-curve, just with a couple clicks more, but also with more flexibility as to how to position the S-curve. We also have these for the individual color channels, as you can see. We have a hue versus hue channel, hue versus hue curve, so I can grab the yellow and move that over to green, or hue versus sad. We have all the standard curves that you have in a grading tool. And with the pick function here, you could even go right here into the image and click and drag and desaturate the color under the cursor, which works really great. A tool similar to the curves is the vectors tool. So let me now enable the lookup table again. This is now very contrasty, so let's reset our curves here. Also this, and make it a bit darker again. Okay. Now the vectors work, like I said, quite similar to the curves. However, they basically give you two curves in one interface. Let me set this to log. For instance, we have the green tones here in the background. So I can grab the green primary here and move this over to yellow. Shift it from green towards red even if I want to. Or I can, if I move it towards the middle of the grid, desaturate it. So this is a nice way of working. We also have a different grid here, and we obviously also have a pick function. Once I enable that and I click into the yellowish greenish grass here, I can bring that down just in luminance or also in saturation by dragging it to the right, as you can see. Okay, so much for the vectors. What's probably even more interesting to you is the LUT menu. So in the LUT menu, we have a really great function called the LUT cycler. So for this, let me load a different LUT from this folder. As you can see, I have 3 lookup tables in this folder, and this especially helps if the DP gives you a folder with his favorite look LUTs. And one of these LUTs is going to be the show LUT, or maybe 3 of them, who knows. However, I have this folder with 3 LUTs in it, and I'll choose the first one, the 70s LUT here. Load them. Oh, now I have to dial in a little bit of contrast on my own to make a nice image. Okay, and with these 2 arrows down here, I can cycle through all the other LUTs that are in that same folder. So if I do that, now I get the grid LUT, and now I get the thriller LUT. Well, I dialed in a little bit too much contrast. Let me dial that back a little. Something like this. So I can switch through really fast, as you can see. Or in the drop down here, I have direct access to any of the lookup tables in that folder. And just select that. Now, before we get to the color management, let's take a quick look at raw decoding controls. This menu, which is labeled QuickTime here, is dynamically labeled depending on the underlying format. So right now I have a QuickTime file here, and as you can see, I only have a control to determine whether it's interpreted video range or legal range. On that matter, I know that some people choose full range because they think it retains more image detail in the highlights and shadows. For some tools that might be true because they do the YOV to RGB conversion in integer on the CPU, and with that clip a lot of image detail. However, Scratch does not do that. Scratch uses the GPU and converts from YOV, what's in the file, to RGB, which is internal in Scratch, in full float on the GPU. So you can interpret the file as video range and hence look at correct blacks and whites right from the beginning without losing image detail. So anything that would otherwise be clipped, anything that goes beyond 100% white, you can bring that back. For instance, using the soft clip tools here in the LUT menu, which, by the way, are not tied to a lookup table. You can choose them even without having loaded a LUT. However, as you can see now, this reads QuickTime. If I go back to our Array Raw shot here and go to color fix with that, in here this menu is labeled Array Raw, and we have all the debugging settings for Array Raw. Or if I quickly import a red raw file, just like that, drop it in here. Red raw, as you can see here, ships with a whole heap more controls that you can choose to debugger to a certain color space or even the resolution. Right now we have the show resolution set to an 1/8 resolution and the actual clip resolution to something above UHD, but you can change all that obviously. So if I zoom in really hard and change the resolution to half res good, now we have a nicer image to look at. However, all these settings here are on a per clip basis. What you can do is copy everything and paste, and make sure that inside the paste menu you enable the node controls, and then you can paste forward, which means to all clips following this clip. The other way to do this, as you know, with all batch operations, is the media browser. So you would select all your clips, go to media browser, to the node tab, and in here again you have all the same settings that we just had in ColorFX, but here you can change them for all selected clips. Okay, now for color management. Let's again take a look here. Color management in Scratch goes 3 ways. Just to give you a quick introduction, the clip has its own color space tag. Right now it's set to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, because actually with the LUT we had loaded earlier, this one, it would be in Rec 709 space indeed. So this is why the clip here in the media menu is tagged with Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. If I display my metadata stack over here, I can see the same drop downs and the same flags here. Now for the second place where color management hooks in, if you go to settings, monitors. In here Scratch lists all the monitors or SDI outputs attached to your system. So here's my interface monitor and it's set to source right now, which means just show me the clip as is. Don't change anything. But I could obviously also set this to Rec 709. And my SDI output right now is set to P3 D65 with a PQ curve. With this, and especially if I have an SDI card that has more than just one output, I can configure one output to show Rec 709 and Gamma 2.4 SDR, and the other output P3 D65 in PQ HDR. So this way I could monitor SDR and HDR next to each other on set. Now back to our clip. If we would say, okay, you know what, we don't load lookup tables here. So this is actually the clip that we're looking at, and it's obviously in Alexa White Gamut and Lock C. So if we now set that up here and choose Alexa White Gamut, and with that Lock C here, as you can see, that also changed right away in here. Now the image doesn't look as lock anymore, now does it? Well, this is because of Scratch's color management. Scratch compares the source clip's color space, which is Alexa White Gamut and Lock C right now, with the color space for the monitor. And our interface monitor right now is set to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. So what Scratch does is it converts from whatever the clip is in to what the display needs, right? And it's the same way with rendering. For instance, this clip right now is tagged as Alexa White Gamut and Array Lock C. If we go to the Render tab, our output node is also set to Rec 709 and Gamma 2.4. And in most cases, the Apply button here will be enabled. So again, for rendering, Scratch will compare the clip's color space, Alexa White Gamut, Lock C, with the timeline or output node's color space, which is set to Rec 709. And if the Apply button is active, it will do a conversion. And this is something that you might potentially trip over when starting to work with Scratch. You've loaded all your lookup tables that take care of the lint to lock conversion. However, Scratch's own color management is also active. So if I now enable my lookup table, as you can see, this looks very horrible, because the lookup table does the Lock C to Rec 709 conversion, but at the same time, Scratch does it too, because it compares the clip to the display and does that conversion. Now there's two ways around this. One is you set the display to source, and it just shows you the clip as is. With a LUT on it or not, doesn't matter, it shows the clip as is, no automatic transform. And also here, upon rendering, we disable the Apply button. That's probably the best way to work, but you can also automate that. Let me quickly exit the project, go to System Settings, and search for Color Management. And this is what I did. I enabled this setting called Disable Color Management, and once that is enabled, from this point onwards, even for existing projects, when you create a new timeline, the Apply button will by default be disabled, and you have to explicitly enable it if you want the color management. And for new created projects, from that point onwards, the default will be set to source here for the interface monitor. So you don't have any color management there either. And I think for most people it indeed makes sense to disable color management, because you will very likely be using your own lookup tables to take care of any color space conversions. Alright, but this way we have already been touching on the Render tab. So let's quickly see, do we have anything else in here? No, I don't think so. No, I think we're well, actually, sometimes you might need to take snapshots. You can do that up here with this button. And once you press that, you can see that the Trace button lights up. And in here is a snapshot category. And the snapshot itself will also be stored on disk, obviously. Another thing that you might need to do is compare clips. What you can do, for instance here, if you want to compare this clip and this clip, you would open the tray and look at the timeline tray in here, like that. And now you can hit D for dual view, and let me scale that down a little, D for dual view, or S for split view, and then you would just grab one of these clips and drop it here into the right side. Just click, drag, drop, you're done. And then you can hit play, like such, and during the playback, oops, come on. you can just rotate or wipe through, just like that, and compare clips. S and D for split and dual view. Okay, so let's go to the Render tab. The Render tab starts with the main output node here, and the main output node represents your timeline in terms of resolution, aspect, and frame rate. You can change your timeline resolution at any point in time. So right now, as you can see, if I go to color fix, we have our native 2K resolution clips in here, and we have scaled them up to 187% to fit our UHD timeline dimensions. However, if I decide that my timeline should only be, well, 1080-23, I've just done that. However, now going back to color fix, you can see now our timeline is so much smaller than our already scaled up footage. So what I'll do is, again, select all and select fit width, and now everything is scaled down 93% to fit the new timeline dimensions. However, anytime I create a new timeline, if I now hit add here, you can see the new timeline is again UHD. And this takes us back to what I said at the beginning. Scratch is really flexible, in all ways thinkable. So if mid-production you think, you know what, the UHD default is really not that great, just close the project, go to project settings, and set this to HD 2397 frames per second, hit OK, enter project, and as you can see, none of the existing timelines are changed. So this one is still UHD, and the one that I changed before here is HD, and so on. Nothing has changed for anything that existed already. However, if I now create a new timeline, it already is in HD 2397 resolution. Isn't that nice? Now, back to our output tree. I'll just set it back to UHD and 2397 and also scale up our footage again. Let's for a second pretend that we indeed have a 4K timeline with 4K native footage or 8K footage scaled down, and we want to render different plates from that. Now, we could leave this to OpenEXR, Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, or probably in VFX they want to have scene linear EXRs and render this output node. However, for our dailies, we probably want to create a little output tree. So let's hit this plus icon, and this allows us to add any kind of node into our tree. And I'll start with a transformer node. A transformer node can hold a specific grade. So let's say we're rendering something, I don't know, for a different delivery or a different viewing device, whatever. We could just brighten it up here. And I went too fast. Let's go back to the render menu. When you double click any of these nodes here, like such, you will be thrown back into ColorFX, however, not with an individual clip, but with the whole timeline, which is why the mini timeline here is yellow, indicating that whatever you do now, like migrate, making it super bright, applies to the whole timeline. So this is basically like a timeline node in Resolve if you want. Okay. However, what these transformer nodes also can do are color space transforms. Let's say here my main output node is Rec 709 linear. However, for my H.264 and Avid DNX dailies, I don't want to render out scene linear. So I would choose my transformer node, set this to Gamma 2.4, and enable the apply button. And now back to color management real quick. Scratch will look at the first node and see that this is Rec 709 scene linear, and compare it to those same dropdowns on the transformer node. which says Rec 709 in Gamma 2.4. However, these two dropdowns would only be a flag, nothing else, except if the apply button is enabled. And now Scratch will actually do a color space transform to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. And the last thing that these nodes can do, let me quickly delete that and add a new one, is obviously resolution changes. So I want to scale everything down to HD. So let's choose HD 2397. But as you can see right now, we're only creating a center cut off of the UHD source image. If I enter this again, as you can see, we are here in the output stack. And this is the main output node with all the image, and this is our transformer node in HD. And as you can see, it just cuts off the image, which is obviously not what we want. Back to the render tab. Each and every node has this format settings tab. And for a transformer or image node, you will find the scaling options in here. So if I set the scaling to fit width, as you can see, now everything is scaled down. Looking at it, UHD, HD. Nice, that's what we want. And whatever's in the Format Settings tab, you will find in the Node tab here once you're inside Color Effects. Now be careful, if you switch to the version stack over here, you are back on the individual clip, indicated by the blue mini timeline. And going to the output stack, you're on the outputs. It's basically like switching between construct and render up here, but from within the player, from within Color Effects or Edit. Alright, now we have that transformer node that scales everything down to HD. What we might want to add next is, well, maybe our DNX encoder. Or even more so, let's go one step backwards, add a burnin. Now a burnin node comes with all these tabs, and they don't particularly help you here in the render menu. So let's double click that and enter into Color Fix with it. The burnin node lets you, just type in some text. However, what you can also do is type in timecode, double point, and then we have our metadata tokens here that we are already so familiar with. So where is source timecode? Here we go. Display that. We can even make that a little bit bigger. And here we can type in clip name and add as name to it, for instance. We can create a new text box. Put this down here. Set x to 0. All right. And do scene. Hashtag scene. Oops. Like this. Create a new text box, center it, move it up again, and type in take, hashtag take, and so on. We have guides here, so you could even display action and title saves if you want that, with blanking or not. The blanking you could actually use to create letter boxes if needed. And in the Flash tab, you can dial in so-called flash frames or flash guides, which means the metadata here is now being displayed for, let's say, 30 frames at the beginning and 10 frames at the end. So on the first 30 frames of this clip, we would see the metadata here being shown, and then it's gone, and then on the last 10 frames they will be displayed again. And this goes for each and every clip. Let me disable that. And as you can see, always the corresponding metadata is being shown here in the burn-in. When you are here in the burn-in menu, you can hit save and save your preset as a .pls. Make sure to be in the burn-in menu, because from any other menu, if you then hit save, you won't get the PLS here, and also not here. So be in the burnin menu, hit save, and now you can save this as a preset. Okay, back to the render tab. Now we can add, let's say, an H.264 encoder and configure our H.264 web dailies. So these will be H.264. Again, we're here in the format settings tab, which is different from node to node, right? The transformer node has the scaling settings here in the format settings tab, and the H.264 encoder has the settings for, well, surprise, H.264 encoding. So now we can enable all the audio channels that we need. And even more important, here in the post-render tab, we can now choose our custom command for COPRA to upload these H.264 clips, or basically to create an XML for COPRA right after our H.264 dailies have been rendered. Back to the transformer node, and let's add a DNX encoder node. So this is supposed to render our Avid DNX MXF, and without the burnin, as you can see. We're bypassing the burnin node right here. In the format settings, I'll choose DNX36. I will enable our 4 audio channels. How many do we have? 5 audio channels actually, although, oh, I didn't sync audio here. That's why. Okay, let's just assume 5 audio channels. And I'll go back to the output settings. Oops, and let's leave this to gamma 2.4 and these two. Okay. Now the last thing before we can render out everything is the file naming. And the thing with dailies is obviously that you want to render each and every clip into a new separate clip. You don't want to render your whole timeline as one big clip, which is what's happening right now. As you can see, right now we would be rendering one big MXF called timeline9.transform.dnxencoder.mxf. If you click into the file name or click the set button over here, you can see that for the output file name, we're using hashtag name, which is the name of the current node. And the name of the current node is just this. If I rename that to Avid Render, I would now create an Avid Render MXF. Now that being said, as soon as you use anything in here in the file name specification that changes from clip to clip, like our beloved sname, source name, Scratch will create separate clips. Why is that? Well, if you look at our 4 clips here, they have different source names. So this is A25, clip 1, this is B24, clip 13, and so on. And with the source name changing from clip to clip, so will the output file name change from clip to clip, and hence for Scratch to create single clips. I know in other apps this is just a checkbox. It's a bit more complex here in Scratch, but quite honestly this is so much cooler. And it gives you so much more, again, flexibility. Because you cannot just use one token here. You can actually add an underscore and add the current date to it, just like that. Or, I don't know, add the circle take metadata to it. If you do that, Scratch will add the word circled in if the circle take is actually circled. Otherwise it will just be empty, and this helps you to then also sort on a Finder or Explorer file browser level to separate the circled takes from the non-circled takes. If, for instance, the director asks you to just upload circled takes and so on. So this is really a nice way to build up your file name. For whatever reason, you might want to change that from being just the source name. However, you can also, let me add sname in here twice, not just combine them with underscores, you can also put in a slash. So if I, let's say, put in the date here and now do a / Scratch will create a folder with the current date, and maybe I can combine date with hashtag group, which our group, you know, says day 1. Now Scratch will create a folder out of the date and the group name, day 1, and inside render all the files using sname. And I can obviously save this as a template, my dailies file name, difficult word, and just add it to the drop down here. If I now hit OK, go to my H.264 dailies, click in here, I can just choose it from the list and apply it here. And even more so, if I now select the main output node, I can save this whole tree, including the file names, including the burnin and everything, as an output template here. Super dailies. Save. If I now go to a different timeline, well, let's choose one that has content, this one, I can choose my fresh super dailies template, hit apply, and I have the whole output tree here with everything in it. And to take this one step further, because now if I create a new timeline, I have an empty render page again. Close project, go to project settings. Here I can select a default output template, my super dailies template. Okay, back into our project. And if I now create a new timeline, I already have that output tree attached there. So this really gives you a lot of ways to automate smaller tasks or combine them all to automate one big task. Apply the output tree with all the nodes in it, with the burnin in it configured the way I wanted, with the file name specification the way I wanted, and so on. Now, this being said, let's go back to our tree here. Let me delete that tree. Scratch ships with a pre-made COPRA H.264 dailies template. You can just recall that, apply it, and now choose one of the two resolutions in here. And as the post-render action, select the COPRA command here, which I have set up in the system settings, custom commands, COPRA in here. You can download the script which creates the COPRA XML from our webpage, from the support side, and then hook it in here and render your H.264 COPRA dailies. Now, in order to render our COPRA dailies out, all we have to do is select the node that we want to render and either hit render node or add to queue, and with that it will be in our render queue. And then we can start single items out of that render queue by hitting start selected, or just start the queue and Scratch will start rendering one item after another, and we can exit out of the render queue, create a new timeline, and continue working by, for instance, loading in new footage like this one, and continue to work on the next card or on the next camera, etc., because all rendering in Scratch happens in the background. Now let me stop that. What I also had on my list is the report dialog to create reports and also importing Avid DNX HD MXF into Avid, but I'll keep that for the Q&A, and for now hand over to Ansgar, who will take my rendered H.264 MP4s, including the XML that the post-render script created, and upload everything to COPRA. Ansgar, you're up.
Hi guys, yeah, thanks Mazze for the introduction, and I'm Ansgar, the product manager for COPRA, the Dailies platform. And for those of you who don't know this platform, you can upload your transcoded clips to that platform, and from there on you can share them and make them available to your creative team. And as you can see, currently we are available in the web with specific apps for the iPad, iPhone, and Apple TV. And COPRA basically is available in 3 different flavors. So it's every time the same feature set and it's the same code base, but with different use cases in mind. So down here you can see those 3 different use cases. So the first one is COPRA in the cloud, which means basically that the clips are hosted in our cloud. So it's not AWS or Google Cloud, it's our own cloud hosted on our secure infrastructure. And the second one is available for working in a local Wi-Fi, in a local network only. So basically the idea is that you install your own COPRA server on your DIT machine, and then you can access the Dailies files that you put in them from the connected iDevices, and of course from the web browser. So the idea being that, for example, in the morning you collect all the iDevices from your creatives, and then you transfer them, you transfer the dailies onto those devices, and then you give the devices back to the people, and they can watch the dailies in a secure environment, leave comments, leave notes, and etc. And the third use case is that you can run your own COPRA server. So with that, you get a branded experience. So it's not COPRA anymore. It can be your name, your company, or your DIT service, for example. And with that, you get your own server with your own URL, your own domain, and with the apps in the App Store as well. So that's those are the 3 use cases. And today I wanted to show you a first glimpse of what we've been working on for quite some time now, which is the complete new version of COPRA. It's brand new, so we started from scratch and built upon the experience from the current version. So COPRA is available for the last 10 years and is in use, or was in use, worldwide on a number of projects. So, and from that experience, we built the new version to be hopefully better in each of those departments there. And yeah, with that, let me just show you. So the first thing before actually showing you is that we now have an API. So if there's some tool that that you're working with, then please let us know. And if you have your own workflows, also just write me, and I can give you this this documentation, and then you can have a look at it. What we are currently able to provide there in terms of data connection. And of course, this will be expanded by us. So that's the first new. We have an API. And over to the actual version. So let me just start on the actual starting page. So to give you a quick overview, we have 3 main tabs over here. So this is an overview of all your content, which is called the Projects tab. Because with COPRA, you can have 1 or multiple projects at the same time. So if you're a supervisor, then you're working on multiple projects, it would look a little bit like this. Or if you're running your own server, then there would hopefully be even more projects there. So that's the projects view, where you have access to all the content. And over here, we have the users tab, where you have access to all the users that you can control. So I'm currently logged in as a what we call supervisor. So now I can see all the users that I have basically access to and can assign them to different projects on the left side or different subfolders if I want to. And over here on the links tab, you can see all the direct links that you've created. I will show you in a couple of seconds. There are different ways of sharing material once you upload it to COPRA. And one of these methods is to create a direct link. And with this one, you can access those direct links. Yeah, that's that page. So coming back to the projects overview. In here, as you can see, there's an overview of all the projects. If you hover over them, there's a quick view of some metadata. And let's jump right into this one. So in here, in COPRA, in the new version, you can simply upload by dragging and dropping anywhere on this page. So, or you could use this button, and you can upload 1 clip, multiple clips, multiple folders with multiple subfolders in them, and COPRA keeps the structure intact. So there's no folder flattening, but if you want to upload 1 single folder containing many subfolders with many shooting days, simply drop 1 folder here, and the structure is created on COPRA. So going one thing deeper here, there's the material that I've already imported to save us some time for uploading here. And as you can see here, there's some creation of poster frames so that you get a quick overview of what is in those shooting days there. Now we see only 2 shooting days, but if you're working on, like, I don't know, 30 plus shooting days, then this will hopefully help you to get a better overview. So, and you can of course set it to a size of your liking. So yeah, in here there are the clips that Mazze just exported for us. And let me jump into one clip. So over here you can see, if you're looking for a specific clip, then you can scrub around and look for something. And let's say I want to take a look into this one over here. You present it with a timeline view. And let me just pause this for 1 second. Over on the right side, you can see the metadata are already there. So what I did here, I simply took the XML from Mazze's export together with those 4 clips and simply dragged and dropped them onto this page. And the new thing with the new version of COPRA is that you can import an ALE or a COPRA XML, and you can mix and match them even. So you don't have to import them anymore at the same time as importing clips. So for example, during the shooting day, upload your clips, magazine by magazine if you want to. And at the end of the shooting day, if you collected all the metadata, then simply take the either XML or an ALE, drag and drop it onto here, COPRA will connect it to the clips, and you're good to go. And yeah, over here on the right, you can see there are the comments that Mazze left there, or that were imported into Scratch, and all the other metadata that came over there. So like the scene/shot and take information, for example. And yeah, if you want to have more there, so if you're using an ALE, for example, each and every column of an ALE will be imported over here. So let's say if you have an ALE containing 50 different columns of metadata, those 50 columns will appear over here on the right side. Yeah, the player view itself, you're presented with this view. We have 3 different playback modes. So this is the classic view. You hit play and pause. You can jump by 1 frame, previous or next. I'm using the arrow keys right now. It's better to navigate that way. So as you can see here, I'm going back in time and going forward in time with 1 frame. If I'm pressing and holding shift, then I will jump in 1 second intervals, as you can see at the time code. And this works as well if you're going backwards. If you're using the up and down arrow key, you can navigate through the timeline, previous and next. So hopefully this will make navigating the whole system very easy for you. Over here, you can switch between different presentations. So there is your time code. So if you're looking for something specific, I mean, for those short daily clips, that may not be the best use case, but if you're uploading a screener of 90 minutes and you have to jump to a specific time code, or if you're working with VFX shots, you can switch this to frames. Then you can enter your frame that you're looking for, and without pressing enter, you transport it to that frame. So this is really easy and fast to navigate through those clips there. Yeah, and there's also the normal time that you can show there. So yeah, the new thing, the big feature that's coming with this version of COPRA is that we now transcode everything that is uploaded to the server. And with that, we wanted to get rid of multiple problems. So from time to time, with the current version of COPRA, clips get uploaded that exceed the bitrate, for example. So the system per se is not, we aren't limiting you. So you can upload a 2K file, a 4K file, a 6K file, an 8K file, and with any bitrate that you like there. But of course, on the other side, people wanting to play back those clips, they might be limited in their either internet connection or in their devices. So from time to time, it happened that people couldn't play back clips that were uploaded by other people there. And of course, you always had the problem of slow internet connections. So, and here, as you might know from YouTube and Vimeo and any other video platform there, you can now switch between those different resolutions that we are providing there. So what we don't do is any upres. So if you're only uploading a 720p file, then the max resolution over here available is 720p. And what you see down here, you can always access the original uploaded transcode. So your transcode there. That's very important for us, and that's also the same for downloading. So if you want to download something with this button over here, you always get the original upload. So no worries that you get some intermediate codec there. So it's only for viewing there. And coming over to the sharing, so there are multiple ways. So the easiest one would be to either share one clip. So simply use this button over here, and then you're getting this new mask here, where you can either give this share a name or take our default name over there, and then you can decide if you want to send it out via email and enter one or multiple email addresses in here, and a message if you want to. Then you can decide if the recipient should be able to download. And let's say I don't want that for this link, but I do want to set a password. And it's a fairly easy one, but you can do this. And I want this link to expire. And let's say not a week from now, but let's say on this Sunday. And then simply copy this link and paste it into your email or into your message there, whatever. I will now open it up here and show you that there's a name for my share. I enter the password, and you're presented with the same COPRA graphical user interface. So as I only shared one clip now, there is no timeline representation because it's only one clip there. And now on this page, I can see there's no download button either, and I can't reshare this clip. So this is mainly the idea if you want to have a share with people that don't want to bother with a login, and you don't want to create a login for them and stuff like that. So it's pretty much the easy way of sharing there. And coming back to the view here, you can do the same on multiple clips. So if we move up and let's say we want to select only 2 of those clips, you can see it's the same way. This new share opens up, and you can do the same on a folder if you want to. So let's say I want to share the whole folder shooting day 01, then simply do a right click on this one, do the share here, give this another name, shooting day 01, and no download, no password, and that's it. And then again, I can copy this link around. And the nice thing is that with the new version of COPRA, now you can finally access those links that I just created. So over here on the links tab, you can see those are the links for all my projects. And over here, you can search for something, you can filter for something, you can sort your way around. And of course, on the left side, I could now select the Scratch demo project, and now I'm presented with only the links that I created for this project over here. So, and again, you can do something. Let's say I want to invite another user. I could do this now. I could change the expiration date, or I made an error and that's why I want to delete this share, and that's it. And the same works for, let's say I want to delete all of them. Then I can show you that once you've deleted those links, they aren't available anymore. I mean, it's still playing back right now because it's cached by the browser, but once you press reload or anybody else would open that link, the link is not valid anymore because I've deleted it. So coming back over here, I just missed to show you guys a new feature there. So we now have 3 different playback modes. So this one is the classic clips mode, and then we have the stills mode. So what we're doing there right now is we jump into the middle of a clip, take one still, and then you can browse the timeline by, again, using the arrow keys. So this gives you a pretty fast overview of all the clips in there in forms of stills. And in the future, we want to expand on that feature so that you will be able to upload your own stills, that you will be able to create more than one still per clip, and so on. So that's currently like a placeholder feature. And the third one is kind of a mix in between, which we call fast mode. And what we're doing there is we jump again into the middle of a clip, play back 5 seconds, then jump to the next clip, and again, play 5 seconds, and so on. So with this mode, which obviously is not for the DP or for the director, but more geared towards the producing side, where you want to get a fast overview of what was shot today or yesterday and still want to see moving images instead of stills. That's the mode geared toward those use cases there. So those are the 3 different playback modes, and let's have a look on my script over here. Yeah, that's basically the things that I wanted to show you in the new version. And if you have any further question, feel free in the Q&A section right after this one, or send us a message. And if you want to have a demo project, simply go to copra.de, and you will get an overview, and you can get a free trial or ask any questions that you might have. So thanks.
All right, here we are. Hope everybody can hear me. I noted down a few questions, but let's see.
Yeah, I saw there were some in between when you were in your demo, but most of them or some of them got already answered.
Yes, so I have to confess one thing. I started recording with Ansgar's part, which means I have a whole bunch of work to do over the weekend, because I'll be recording this whole demo all over again. Other than that, I saw the question to load audio in the new timeline dialog. The path is there in the very, very latest build. So update Scratch and you'll have that path. The other thing is metadata being pushed through in the MXF files. Yes. How does Scratch... Oh, yeah, okay, first this one. How does Scratch handle 5994 time? Because it's not a standard, different ways of handling it in cameras and in post tools. It handles it correctly. As a matter of fact, we did have a case recently where it was pointed out to us to change something to make the handling of that timecode much easier, and we changed that, and it seems to have been revolutionary. So I assume we're doing all right. Other than that, I'm sorry for the very short answer. Do you use .1 frame or don't?
Well, yeah, I saw another one, I think maybe more geared toward COPRA. And
Go ahead.
I just realized that I forgot to tell you guys this. With the new version, as we are doing our own transcoding, we are now supporting several input formats. So you can upload H.264, H.265, and you can use HDR with those variants, Apple ProRes, Avid DNX HD, and Sony XAVC. And with the DNX HD, we are already supporting MXF containers, but unfortunately, we still have to iron out some things when you want to render, let's say, an Avid DNX HD 36 for offline editorial, because as you know, you get different containers for video and audio, and we have to still work out how to sync those containers on COPRA. So, but the whole idea is that you might not be needing to do 2 transcodes, as Mazze showed you, but instead, if your internet connection is fast enough for those uploads, you could upload one DNX HD 36, and then the offline editorial can simply download the folder where all the DNX HD files are still in there. And the rest of the creatives can watch the dailies in COPRA because they were transcoded. So that's our goal, our workflow that we have in mind there. So hopefully this answers the question that I saw in the chat in here.
I think you can just go on with the next question.
Yeah, Daniel. So in my understanding, there are 2 ways to render the MXF, and most of the guys I talked to seem to be rendering 2 different, or seem to be rendering the MXF that you get in video MXF and an audio MXF. So that's my understanding. But if you are using it in another way, so basically only using one container, please let me know.
Okay. Um, 2 containers.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's why I mentioned that we are working on this workflow, because as far as I can see, it would be a time saver that you don't have to do 2 renders there, but instead only do 1. And as I mentioned, if the connection is fast enough, you can upload that transcode, which should hopefully be enough there.
Okay, for the metadata question, I'm trying to do that really quick here, because obviously I anticipated this path, and I already rendered my MXF files out of Scratch. So you can see here, we have the files rendered, A1, A2, A3. These are all the audio MXF. And as you can see, they have the channel name attached to them in the file name, which is a nifty little thing that I'll show you in just a bit. And here's the video MXF, which has the V1 appendix to it. Now I'm getting an email every now and then where people say, hey, how can I get rid of this V1 appendix? I don't want that. This really is only in the file name. The master clip name, as you will see in a second, is completely unaffected by this. So to get those clips into Avid, as you can see, I have Avid open here. Here's my Dailies bin. I'll drag it out here. And the way to get the files in, which might also not be known by too many people, is this. I'll copy this folder. And here we have our Avid Media file, MXF folder, and I'll paste it right in there. And I hope that my external hard drive won't quit on me right now, please. All right, and now I'll rename this to just 1. And as you can see, there's no database file whatsoever in here. However, if I quickly Alt-tab into Avid or just bring it up here, you can see here it's indexing real quick. And if I now Alt-tab back, I have the database file down here. And now all you have to do is drag and drop that into your bin. And here are our 4 clips. And if you now go through, and obviously, as you can see, there's no V1 appendix on the master clip name. You could even have used Scratch to rename all the clips to #scene _ #take if the assistant editor wants you to do that, because the original file name is still being carried here in the tape column. And now if we go through here, you have the tape ID, which shows the source WAV file, which I believe, yes, that was one question. Sound file name is also being carried here, and you could indeed relink that in Pro Tools or whatever tool you use there. And as you can see, all the other source metadata that we had in our source QuickTime files, and even Note 1, which is _yellow with generator in background, Mazze's common Basecamp generators. All that travels through, same as the sound timecode, which I'm not sure if any other app does that right now. But we also forward the sound timecode, and here in the TRK 1, 2, 3, 4, you have the audio channel names. And now what's even better, because what editors always want to do is being able to read those, read those file names or the channel names here in their timeline. And the only way to do that right now is if I go here, where's clip data? Why did clip text? Here we go. Is to show the media file name. If I don't show that, usually clips show up like this in Avid, and that doesn't tell you much. However, if you go to clip text and you enable the media file names, that gives you the actual audio channel names here right on the tracks. And this right now is the only way to display them in Avid, which is precisely why we add them to the file name. All right, I hope that answers this question. Do we have anything else? Exported. Is it possible to export nodes as markers in the DNX export? The correct time. Oh, yes. Yes, I think that is possible. As a matter of fact, something I didn't show in the end was the report function. Let me quickly do that. So here I have my 4 clips. Two things to check your renders, obviously, is if you import, and now let me quickly import my MXF files here, just like that. If I exported everything correctly, I will end up with the same number of clips in the same color. Oh, Jesus, that, give me one sec. That did not work. I want to set this to Avid MXF. Here we go. Try that again. Here we go. So I will end up with the same amount of clips with the same color right above the other clips. And then I can step through my timeline and quickly, well, not on this timeline. And then I can step through and quickly check whether my renders are correct. And obviously, if I now select those, throw them away again, let's assume this is my timeline full of my dailies with my source footage. I can go to Tools, Report, or alternatively in the Render tab, I also have the Report, oops, that was too fast, the Report button down here. Click that, and now I can select a report type, like Clip Basics, for instance. The scope would be my timeline, or if I'm just exporting one report at the end of the day, as you know, our group is day 1, I would set the scope to group. I'll leave it at timeline for now. The poster frame, you know, from how far into the clip it should take the poster frame in the report. And I can even set a logo. I'm not sure if I have a logo, to be honest. I'll leave that for now. There's other report types like clip metadata where I can choose precisely the metadata that I want. Or I can output a CSV, plain metadata, CSV, etc. Let me just give you the clip basics report. If I now hit OK, I can choose whether I want to export a PDF or an HTML. The HTML has the advantage that you can still edit it before you print it to PDF through your browser. If I just do the PDF like that, it takes a moment. And it actually should open. It should actually open right away. Save. Why is it not saving? It is sadly not saving my report. Why does it not do that? Report, clip basics, timeline, okay, desktop, save. Ah, here we go. And there opens my report. So this also has the comments in it and everything. And the info up here about the production, title, company, producer, director, DOP, DIT, etc., that you can all tune in here in the properties tab. And if I'd be a good demo artist, I would have told you right at the beginning to do that at the start of your job. Now I do it in hindsight. As for exporting nodes, other than through a report, you can obviously export an ALE, which will also contain these nodes as comments in the EDL. And also you can export an ALE with these comments in it. Okay, where is my, here we go, stop. Oh yes, we do background rendering. That's a great thing to have. So you can start your render. I didn't show you the render queue, but you can just add your render to the queue, fire off that render queue, have it render in the background, create a new timeline, import new footage, load lookup tables, sync audio, whatever you want. and do that while Scratch is rendering in the background. Ace's Dailies. Oh, well, we are approaching 2 hours for this webinar, Daniel. You realize that, right? I think I'll save that one for another day. Yes, thank you. Okay, but I do think we are through with everything. Oh yes, Jamie, we will well, we have separate tutorials on color management actually, but yes, we will post this webinar, although I have to re-record it, but I will post it probably next week. Okay, guys, I think that's it. We're through with the night. If you have any more questions, please feel free to send either Ansgar or me an email, and we'll gladly get back to you. Meanwhile, make sure to get a demo of COPRA from their website, and also get any of our software, which is free until end of October, from our website, and play around with it. And if you run into anything, send us an email. All right, guys. I guess we're finished for tonight. Thanks for staying with us.
Time to say goodbye. Yeah, thanks from me as well, and good night, everyone.